to Divine Energy in Motion. My name is Christina Rojas. Today I'll be discussing the dark divine feminine as it relates to sovereignty and balance within myself. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath with me, just to land here and be present for this episode, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Before we dive in, I want to share how I approach these conversations, just so you know the lens I'm speaking from. When I use the words masculine or feminine, I'm talking about energies, not bodies. I'm sharing from my personal perspective as a woman. But I believe these currents live in all of us in unique ways. Take what resonates and let go of the rest. Everything I share here comes from my own lived experience and inner knowing. Sometimes I may speak about things I've read or heard, but I don't go out of my way to research every angle of a topic. For me, that kind of seeking can become more about projections than truth. Instead, I trust whatever information I need will find me, whether through guidance, synchronicity, or direct experience. So while I'm not a knowledge-based expert, I am an expert in my own life, and that's the perspective I share from. I'll be sharing my own journey, how I came to know this energy, and how balancing light and dark has transformed the way I move in the world. While much of what I share is directed towards feminines, if you are a masculine resonating with this channel, my hope is that this gives you a deeper understanding of the dark divine feminine. She is not something to avoid or fear, but something sacred, wise, and necessary. Let's get started. I'm going to say my healing journey started at the beginning of the pandemic, and I actively started working on healing my traumas, my wounds, whatever you want to call them, doing exercises and really trying to understand my thought process and how it was that I was viewing my life through my own lens. And over a period of time, I realized after working through shadow work and inner child work, and what I mean by that is really looking at my childhood experiences, how they shaped my perspective, and going through and rewiring the emotions and feelings that I had about myself. I got to a point where I was looking at my experiences, and if they made me feel a certain way, I would look at it as, oh, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself? Why do I feel angry after this interaction with this person? Or why do I feel abandoned? Or why do I feel, XYZ after a specific interaction with a person? And it became kind of automatic. So I would say that in doing that over like 2-3 years, it got to a point where, I got myself out of a very deep depression. I got myself out of like extreme anxiety. And I was pretty much in this place where I thought, okay, I'm not attracting, I don't want to say negative, but I'm not attracting situations that I don't prefer anymore. So anything that's coming into my frequency must be for me. So I like embodied this perspective of a divine feminine that was all encompassing of light and love, that my response to the world, regardless of the interaction, was going to be from a place of light and love. It was going to be soft, it was going to be tender, it was going to be accepting. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't have any boundaries. I told myself that everything that came um, into my orbit was for me, whether it was for a lesson or whether it was to benefit me in some other type of way, because consistently, um, my outside reality was starting to change, and my experiences always seemed positive on the outside. It wasn't like, um, it wasn't obviously negative. It wasn't like, somebody disparaging me or attacking me. So in my mind, everything was for me because everything just seemed so flowy and nice. Um, and so as a result, I didn't have any boundaries or discernment for that matter. And what I mean by discernment is distinguishing whether or not something in front of me was for me or not for me. And if it wasn't for me, to put up a boundary and walk away, or communicate that boundary to a person or whatever, and be able to disconnect myself from that interaction. In my mind, anything that was dark was low vibrational, or something that wasn't for me, that was going to cause me some sort of harm. So I always felt that there was a darker energy within me, but I always thought that it was some sort of distorted masculine energy, if you will. Because when I did put up boundaries, um, it was from a place of like aggression, or if I was cutting people or clearing space, it was more like cutting people down. Um, and my authority was coming from a place of control instead of a place of wisdom. So there were a lot of these uh, qualities that were, I already possessed, but they were distorted in a way that there were aspects of them that I needed to keep, but I needed to keep them through it, and use them or express them through a different light. It wasn't until I went to Costa Rica in 2023, the summer of 2023, that I went to do an ayahuasca retreat, that I first learned about the dark divine feminine. And it was explained to me that, she was from the earth, and that she existed, you know, from this place of wisdom, ancestral wisdom, through lineages that were passed down. And it was almost like patriarchal religions created this separation between like dark and light, and they made it seem like God was in the light, and that in the dark existed the opposite of that in the form of some kind of evil. And so it was communicated to me that it was more of a way for fundamental organized religion to suppress this feminine ancient wisdom as a form of control. What they called evil was simply the wisdom of women that was carried in the dark. And much of this wisdom was celebrated in ceremonies that um, were performed in the dark, and it was mysterious, and that was labeled as evil. I mean, I grew up Catholic, and even you know women like Mary Magdalene, who there's not a whole lot of information about. within Catholicism, um, was, profoundly wise, and she was slandered by the church, stripped of her power, and essentially made to seem like a prostitute. So there's from what I understand, a long history of the suppression of, you know, ancient, dark, divine, feminine wisdom. The dark, divine, feminine is powerful and is often misunderstood, and a misunderstood aspect of feminine energy, because unlike the light, feminine archetype, which is like nurturing and soft and loving and receptive, the dark divine feminine embodies this raw, mysterious, transformative, and at times destructive qualities of the feminine principle. She's not evil. She is a shadow, integrated, unapologetic, and sovereign, and often very deeply healing. When I talk about shadow integration, um, the dark divine feminine, she embraces a part of herself that society has told her to hide, like rage or sensuality, grief, jealousy, power, desire. These are all aspects, just in general, that um, are frowned upon, for women in modern society. And the dark divine feminine, she doesn't suppress these aspects of herself, she alchemizes them. Like Kali, the Hindu goddess of destruction, the dark divine feminine destroys illusions, ego structures, and false identities to pave the way for truth and rebirth and transformation. Her destruction isn't chaotic for the sake of chaos, it's surgical. She burns away what no longer serves her. The dark divine feminine also touches on erotic power and sacred sexuality. She deeply embodies and connects with her sensuality, but just not for the male gaze or approval of others. It's more so that she understands that sexual energy is a creative life force, and it and wields it consciously and sacredly. And it's interesting because, at least the church kind of suppresses that. Really, most mainstream organized religions don't really embrace um, like sacred sexuality, or the embodiment of that, like uh, creative life force that's within every woman. It's, women bring life into this world, and the fact that, we don't, well, not that we don't, there's lots of movements out there that embrace that, but um, at least from my perspective, it's not that. I went to church and they were encouraging us to be like sensual beings. It was just, very like suppressed, I'm sure, for purposes of control. The dark divine feminine, is shrouded in mystery and intuition. Like she thrives in the unknown, and she's deeply connected to the cycles of the moon, death and rebirth, and the subconscious. That's her power is felt, it's not always seen. And she often operates through intuition, dreams, and symbols. And all of this lends itself to this sovereignty where she doesn't seek validation or permission from others. It's like she knows her worth and she walks in her truth, even if she's misunderstood. The dark divine feminine, she's a truth teller and a boundary setter. She'll say the things that no one else will. She'll name the elephant in the room. She protects what's sacred. And her boundaries are firm because she honors her own inner temple. In modern life, embodying the dark divine feminine could look like leaving an abusive or soul draining relationship, speaking a truth that disrupts the status quo, reclaiming her body and sexual agency, or just saying no with clarity and without guilt. Walking away from roles that once defined her but no longer align with her, and letting herself fully grieve, have rage, or feel pleasure without any shame. She's not about being mean or manipulative or disconnected. She's about wholeness for herself. And while I heard of these things, here and there, they didn't really sink in um, until I went through a divorce, and it's like the dynamic of the relationship changed, and I started to see where I was overgiving and how I have been overgiving and not having boundaries. And I think that kind of ignited like a wildfire, and I was able to see where I was overgiving in all aspects of my life, where I wasn't, um, living authentically, regardless of what people thought of me. And I'll be honest, when it kind of first came to head and I first realized, wow, how could I have abandoned myself in such a way? It enraged me. I mean, it was like a white rage. I was going to look up those rage rooms because I just wanted to destroy something. I was just so mad. And that was all part of the process, being able to release all of that, um, because you have to feel to heal. And although I was processing emotions, there were still, I was still peeling back layers of the onion, and finding more more to process, more emotions to process and let them go. So, and after the rage, I just felt grief. It was like grief for all the times that I didn't put myself first, grief for all the times that I made, excuses for people. Um, I was just always um, self sacrificing. And I think when I realized when all of it came to a head, I think that's when this dark divine feminine energy was just like, no more. We're not doing this anymore. If it's not in alignment with us, like we're no longer participating. And I had to get to this place where I could really understand my energy from a place that wasn't um, absorbing other people's projections, so that I could really understand, what it is that I liked and what I didn't like. And from that, I use that as kind of a barometer for what was for me. And that was the beginning of the shaping of my discernment, of really saying, okay, is this in alignment with me? Or is this something that, in the past I would have continued, but now my body, my intuition is literally saying, no, this is not for you. And so I've had to put, very strong boundaries up. there are some people in my life that I have to continue to interact with, and our frequencies are no longer aligned, and connecting literally does distress to my nervous system. And I've had to tell myself, regardless of the way I look or I come off, I know that connecting with this particular individual is going, or this person or whoever is going to cause me distress. I have to put myself first. And whatever that looks like, if it means not talking, or, not over engaging or not sharing. That is what it looks like, because at the end of the day, I have to protect my peace. And that is a dark divine feminine saying, no more. I burn this down, um, you know, with the hopes of cultivating soil for something new, to create space in my life for something new, because I'm no longer giving energy to something that is damaging me. I've always been an extremely honest person. And in the past, I sometimes would omit things just because I didn't want to make the other person feel bad. So I figured that omission wasn't necessarily lying, but I wasn't really telling the truth, in the sense of like the truth within myself. So it was almost like not allowing myself to fully live in my authenticity. And now I'll say whatever truth I need to say, as long as it needs to be said. It's not that I'm sitting out here delivering truths, you know, with the intention to hurt people. But at the end of the day, if my intention is to be in authenticity and to be myself and to do what I need to do, um, to make sure that I stay in a state of peace. It doesn't matter um, what the other person thinks. Like, I no longer take that under consideration, as long as my intention is, you know, to do things that really align with myself. Obviously, not trying to harm anybody, but to speak a truth that really is an authenticity with myself, then that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I continue to do. And what's interesting in balancing this dark divine feminine and this light feminine, and having this balance of dark and light, as long as I'm in my authenticity and my truth, I've realized I've become a mirror. And so the dark divine feminine has allowed me to be this mirror for people. And I'm no longer um, dictating, or measuring myself, rather, um, against how people feel when they interact with me. Because if I'm a mirror, I'm literally just reflecting that person back to them. And I've seen, like, sometimes, people get to see how wonderful they are. That they'll find me magnetic, and they'll be, so charmed, or so they'll really enjoy my company. Sometimes over time, because it is the truth, and I really live by my own authenticity, that the mirror, after a while, people start to see the things that they don't necessarily want to look at, and they have a choice. It's like, the mirror is an invitation, uh, whether or not you want to work on those things that you didn't really want to address before, or maybe you didn't notice, and then you know, take the time to work on those things. Or, you don't want to look at them, so you don't want to look at the mirror anymore. And so it becomes this like shift between me and the other person. And before, where I used to internalize that and say, oh, I did something wrong, What did I do, or did I insult them? Now I'm realizing that this is a pattern, and it's really just, how people process their own reflection and what they want to do with that information. The dark divine feminine and embracing that energy has allowed me to be more in balance with my dark and light aspects. And it's changed everything. I walk with substance, and it's like I'm here and I'm not to be messed with, but I'm also tender and delicate and flowy. So it's just this really strong, empowered um, energy of balance, and either one leans in when necessary. Sometimes I need to be more tender and more delicate and more nurturing. Especially with my children. And other times I need to be a little more, you know, um, communicative in terms of setting boundaries, or more communicative on even with kids, needing to say, hey, I'm not I'm not going to tolerate this. I had an incident at the gym when my kids were at the kids club and for childcare. And my son, my oldest son, he is 5, he's going to be 6. He was having an ex, an encounter with a little girl. I guess maybe he didn't want to share a toy, or she didn't want to share a toy, and he took it from her, and he hit her, or something happened, and I was called over. And I remember, as soon as I came over, I was talking to him and saying, hey, did you hit this girl? We've talked about this. I understand you have a lot of big feelings, but under no circumstance can we hit someone else because of our own frustration. And she interrupted me, and a typical 6-year-old girl, 7-year-old girl, wanted to tell me all of the things, give me a play by play of of what of what my oldest did. And I had to stop her. I was like, I appreciate you telling me what happened. However, I don't need the 411. That's not your place. I was informed of what happened. I'm very sorry that he hit you, and he does need to apologize. However, it's not appropriate for you to be sitting here and telling me everything that went on. That's not your place. But the way in which I said it was very like abrupt. It wasn't mean, but there was like authority behind it, and you could kind of see her stop. And it was almost like she was like, oh, like she took it very seriously. And then her energy shifted. And later on, um, when I was trying to get my son to apologize, I think her mom came, and she was like, they're just kids. Like, she didn't want to address it. And that within itself got me a little bit annoyed, because like, this is like, yes, they are kids and they're going to do these things, but this is a learning experience for everyone. It's a learning experience for the kids to be able to have like conflict resolution, so they don't turn into adults that lack conflict resolution. This is a learning opportunity for me and the mother as parents to be able to have conflict resolution. Like, but she did not she didn't want to talk about it at all. And so it almost made me feel like, I don't know, I could be just making this up, but perhaps a girl needed like, you know a woman of authority to be like, hey, like, we're not doing this, because she wanted to do the play by play again with in front of her mother. And I was just like, you know she didn't say anything at all. So it was almost um like that authority, that dark divine feminine authority, like, she recognized it, and it almost like pivoted, the situation. She stopped, tattling, if you will. And so, that dark divine feminine energy is definitely appropriate and necessary, with children. At least for my boys, they sometimes need to hear me speak sternly, lovingly, but sternly, and for them to understand what boundaries are. So, again, the dark divine feminine isn't about being cruel or manipulative. She's about wholeness, balance. She's the feminine after initiation. She's walked through the fire and now she sees in the dark. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope these reflections help you notice where the dark divine feminine might be asking you to step forward in your own life. And so it is.
I'm not emotional, but I haven't cried for days. I run in pace, yeah, I'm so fine. Do you see me through? I do my best, you don't want the truth. I don't get triggered by things. Next day I can't stop spiraling.